All right, Katie.
All right. Well, thank you everybody so much for joining us today for this really special presentation. I'd like to thank Amanda from CLC for organizing this. And for this one, she really did the legwork to invite our speakers and organize this today. So I really appreciate her and CLC's help in managing this roundtable. My name is Katie. I am the Development and Outreach Librarian at the Blackstone Library in Brantford. And today we're going to be talking about communicating about your library's fundraising. And we have two speakers, Joyce Garczynski and Jernine McBride. Joyce is the Assistant University Librarian for Development and Communications at Towson University's Albert S. Cook Library in Maryland. And I did have to look up how to pronounce Towson. I wanted to get it right. In Joyce's role, she teaches journalism students about the research process, manages her library's social media, and coordinates fundraising for her library. She obtained her master's degree in library science from the University of Maryland, College Park, and has a master's in communication from the Annenberg School at the University of Pennsylvania. Joyce is the author of 2 books about fundraising, Fundraising: How to Raise Money for Your Library Using Social Media, and Fundraising for Academic Libraries, a Practical Guide for Librarians. She also received the 2019 Distinguished Education and Behavioral Sciences Librarian Award from the Association of College and Research Libraries for her excellence in teaching and service to the profession. I'm very excited to hear from you today, Joyce. And Jernine is the Associate Director of Development for the University of California, Riverside Libraries. In this role, she is responsible for overseeing and executing the library's annual giving campaign, qualifying, cultivating, and stewarding major gift donors, and building the library's planned giving prospect pool. Jernine works closely with the library's communications specialist to develop and execute stories that highlight student voices and experiences. She obtained a master's degree in education from Arizona State University in 2010 and her bachelor's degree in English from Sonoma State University in 2005. We're also excited to hear from you, Jernine. So with that, I would like to turn it over to the 2 of you and hear what you have to say.
Thank you, Katie, for that introduction. Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm glad to be here with you all and chat as we get this conversation going.
Hello and welcome. We're so glad to be here today. So we're going to start off with a few poll questions. Feel free to just type your responses into the chat if you'd like, or you can share. Our first poll question is, on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 having no experience whatsoever and 5 having tons of experience, how much experience do you have with fundraising?
Awesome. I'm seeing some 4s and 5s. So we have some experienced fundraisers in the group. So this will be great, a great discussion.
Yeah, this is great. Okay. Our second poll question is also on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being completely terrified and 5 being completely excited. How confident do you feel about communicating with donors?
-1, okay. And during the course of us presenting our slides, I mean, this is a free form, so please don't feel you need to wait till the end of the presentation to ask questions. You can feel free to drop those in the chat box as we move through everything.
Okay. And last but not least, this is more free open response. What's your biggest fundraising related challenge?
That's a good one. Yes, capital projects.
Something we all deal with. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Messaging, okay.
So I saw someone drop in the chat regulations. Could you elaborate just a little bit more about what you mean by that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So I'm a fully municipal library, or I represent one, I should say. And so anytime we get a grant or whatever, unless the grant is through our friends organization, there's a lot of additional processes
Got you. Okay.
that I have to go through. So that's usually the most complicated part.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for sharing.
Welcome.
All right. So before we get started talking about some strategies, we wanted to make sure everyone was on the same page in terms of fundraising lingo and some of the terminology.
Sure. And so Joyce, I'm wondering first if maybe we should step back and talk about how development is structured at our respective institutions, because I understand that the structure may be different. So coming from UC Riverside, we have a centralized development office, and there's a lot of annual giving that happens there. We have corporate and foundation support under that as well, and principal giving. So for UC Riverside, principal gifts are gifts of $1 million and more. So we have a separate team that handles that. And then once we come out of central development, we have unit fundraisers. So for myself, I'm assigned to the library, but we have fundraisers assigned to like our business school, our School of Engineering, our Arts and Humanities and Social Sciences. So that's how it's structured at my institution.
And for me, it's similar as well. We also have a development office that's devoted to university fundraising. And then I'm a librarian, and part of my job is fundraising. I am supervised though by the library dean, and I liaise with the university fund development office. For us, our thresholds for what's considered a major gift are much smaller because we're a newer shop at this, but the structure is generally the same.
Great. So just, I know we have some 4s and some 5s in the group in terms of fundraising, but we just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page in terms of these fundraising words. So for development, when I speak of development, and I know people who aren't in the fundraising field, they're just like, what does that even mean? What are you doing every day, right? So for us, that really means connecting our mission with our donor base, our alumni, our community members, and finding that common shared interest and finding ways for them to engage and further support our student body.
And a donor is someone who financially has contributed to your library, to your causes. So that's someone who's already given. Whereas a prospect is someone who you'd like to give. Or give again. So a prospect is more future looking. And so when we use that term, that's what we're talking about.
And then for annual fund, what I mean when I talk about annual fund are the smaller gifts. So the gifts starting at $1 up to just a little under $2,000. And that really feeds into your pipeline. So annual fund gifts tend to come in for us through our crowdfunding campaigns, our efforts around Giving Tuesday, and also mailings that we have that go out throughout the year. And really those mailings come from our central development office and go out to our whole constituency base. And so from there, that's how we start to build our pipeline. So when those smaller gifts come in, if they support a certain unit, then central development will connect those gifts with the unit DO, the development officer, to pursue that prospect to see if they might in turn be a major gift donor. For UCR, our major gift threshold is $25,000 up until right under the $1 million mark. So when I say major gift, that's the amount I'm thinking of. And then for our planned gift, those are our donors or our prospects who may not have the cash right now to leave a major gift, but they care so much about the work that we're doing at our institution. They want to leave that in their will, their trust, whether it might also be a gift of real estate. So things like that is what we consider planned gift. And we also have planned gift officers in central development that as a unit DO, I can partner with them to close some of those planned gifts. So our donor giving cycle. So this is usually the cycle, right? Like all of us are on consistently. And with certain donors, you may go through this cycle multiple times. So identification, right? So that's really doing your research. So for us, we do have assigned researchers to our units. And so I collaborate with them very often to help me identify a prospect pool, people who have given to either our library or other libraries in the area, or support certain initiatives that we have. So anything around like our maker spaces, our GIS lab, drone work. We partner very closely with our School of Engineering. So we have a lot of prospects that overlap. And so I'll partner with some of those DOs for that kind of work. So once you go through that phase, Joyce, were you jumping in on discovery? Is that still me?
It's still you.
Okay, perfect. Just making sure I don't want to overtalk you. Okay, so then once we go, so she has discovery. You might hear it also just called qualification. And those are sort of, right, like those cold calls. So you have this list, you know, your researcher or yourself, you have identified some prospects, and then that's when you start doing your outreach. For UC Riverside, we are pretty new. And when I say pretty new, maybe within about 10 years, about having a solidified development and advancement shop. So our touches to potential prospects are a little more than other more developed universities like say UCLA or UC Berkeley. So typically we reach out to a prospect about 6 times before we either say, okay, they're not interested in being engaged, there's no response. I've called, emailed, maybe sent them a card, invited them to something. Then if there's still no response, then we just kind of, you know, disqualify them and move on, right? Because it's also important to disqualify prospects to really have a strong, firm donor base. And that's really the goal here. So once you have, right, your prospect, you know, you've qualified them, they said they have some interest in giving to your institution, that's when you begin that cultivation process. And that's when you start to ask those questions, right? So why their institution? Why is this a place of interest of them potentially giving a gift? Figuring out where else do they give, right? Because that will help you also learn what their interest may be. Is there someone else who needs to be in that conversation, right? Maybe it's a spouse. Maybe their spouse needs to be there before they commit to a gift. I mean, you would want to know that before you go into a meeting. So it's not like, yes, we had this great meeting. And then they're like, oh, well, it's not up to me. We need to have a discussion outside of this. So that's really that cultivation process. And also that gives you a time now with COVID restrictions being lifted a bit. As you guys know, here in California, our COVID restrictions were very heavy. So some of those are rolling back. So getting those prospects to campus, right? Looking at your collections, that walkthrough phase, getting them excited, seeing the students on campus and really getting them engaged is really important in that cultivation stage. As you move into the pre-solicitation and the solicitation stage, at that point, you should have identified your areas of interest. And this is really where you develop your 90-second commercial, right? They've told you your interests, you know what your needs are, and you've identified that gap. So whether that's preparing a one-page document, something of that you can give to them and really pitch to them how they can help fill that gap and further support the university, your library, and the overall mission of your library as well. So you've solicited them, you've asked them to make a major gift of $25,000 or more. They said yes, of course they said yes, right? And that money rolled in. So what's next? That's stewardship. Stewardship is really, really key because that's what's going to keep them engaged. And potentially if it's a larger donor, they may want to make another gift. So it's good to have a firm stewardship plan. So depending on the gift amount, you may want to have your university librarian write a personal note that you send out to them. If you have something you can send, like a picture from your collections on a postcard, just thanking them, just something for them to know that they're important and they're more than just the gift that they can give to your institution.
And as Jernine said, you know, a lot of times you can go through this process multiple times with the same individual as well. So it really is a circle where you keep on going through. And that stewardship piece that you mentioned is so very important because it is much more expensive to find new donors and bring them through this cycle the first time than it is to retain a donor. So it's always good to focus on that stewardship piece.
And this is also a great time, as Joyce is talking about that stewardship piece, to collaborate if you have a communication specialist or someone that you can work with for social media. I mean, obviously check with the donors, make sure they don't want to remain anonymous, but if they don't, I mean, if you have a library newsletter, spreading that word, you know, getting a few quotes from them. And that's a great way to engage other potential donors as well when they start seeing those type of communication pieces going out.
So now we're going to go through our top 10 list. And these are strategies that we've used, that we've seen used at other libraries and other institutions to meet donors and communicate with donors at various points in the cycle that we just outlined. So I think two strategies that fall under this idea of communicating your giving priorities are so very important, and they're foundational to the rest of your work. One of the first things to do when you're beginning a fundraising program is to establish your priorities. You want a list of about 5 or so priorities, and this list should have lots of different amounts. So you need to know how much each thing costs. And you also want to have a lot of different areas that would benefit your library. So for example, some of it may be capital in nature, others may be collection focused. You want to have a range of options, and you want to make sure that you know how much each priority is going to cost. You know, what's that dollar amount that you can scope out. And you also want to have a sense of timeline. So how long would it take to implement and to bring that priority to completion if you had the right donor for it. And I think this is where it's so very important to work with your library leadership on establishing these priorities. We recently, about a year ago, got a new library dean. And one of the first things that I did when she got here was, what are your priorities? What are your fundraising priorities? Let's sit down and scope these out. So that way we can begin communicating with donors about them. And the very first thing that she did was she sent a letter to all of our existing donors outlining what those priorities were. So if you have new leadership, I highly recommend using this strategy to really get them to solidify those priorities first and foremost. And then you want to operationalize those priorities. What I mean by that is you want to develop a communication calendar so that you know throughout the year which of those priorities you're going to be communicating about when, and what channels you're going to be using to communicate about those priorities. So that way, you know, I'm hitting all of the important priorities at some point. And you know what channels you're reaching to do that as well.
Yes, and one thing to keep in mind, so for those that are raising money for, say, capital projects or those larger projects, so say you need you and the leadership team have decided you need $5 million, right, to renovate a library space, build out more space to store collections. What if you only raise 3 million, right? So what does that mean? And so you need to be aware of that so you can go back and properly steward donors. So even if it's not to that amount, if someone's giving even 2,000, right? They want to know, how is my money being used? And it doesn't need to be a line item list, but you should be able, after a fiscal year, to say you gave 2,000 to our book fund. Money we've used in this fund was for A, B, and C. Here are ways that you have supported our students and our library. And also, if you can get some, quotes from your students of how, these gifts are better, bettering their experience, those are great. And donors really love those type of touch points.
Absolutely.
All right, so building your donor pipeline. So I would love to hear if you guys would drop in the chat ways people are currently building pipeline. Like, how are you all identifying prospects and building out your donor pipelines? See the chat. Okay, so while you guys are thinking about that, I'll tell you the way. I've already touched on this a bit, one at a time, not much. Okay, got it. Not much of a pipeline. And so Douglas, that was similar to when I started at UC Riverside. So I've been there almost 3 years and there was not an established pipeline. So I am still currently working on building a strong donor pipeline and base. Board driven. Okay, well, that's great. Yes, definitely use your board when you can. So if you are in a position where at your respective institution, your library, you have a research team, it is really important to meet regularly with your researchers. I meet with my assigned researcher bi-weekly. Then that way I can talk to her about our current priorities, what I'm looking for, different projects we have coming up. So she can help me really think of creative ways to reach people. We also use social media a lot. So LinkedIn, Facebook, to do a little more recon if there's someone who might pop up. For our alumni, so UC Riverside, we have a very young alumni base. So the average age of our alumni is early 30s, like 33, 34. So, right, so early career, not really established, but they may be engaged to make those connections for people to engage us that way. So really reaching out via LinkedIn, maybe starting a LinkedIn page for recent graduates. Those are ways for you to help build up your donor and prospect base. Joyce, do you have any other tips you want to throw in there?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad to hear that you're, those of you with boards, you're engaging with your board, because that can be a great way to identify donors. Your board should be giving and supporting your library. I know for a number of library boards, that's how you make the selection of who gets to be on the board. It's a lot of times it's those high level prospects with the potential of giving. And also they should be encouraged to go out to their networks and, evangelize essentially for your library as well. Those are the hallmarks of a good board. And another way to engage is look at, who is connected to your library, who is engaging with your library. It can be as simple as, who are those people that keep coming to your events? Who are those volunteers that really love and support your library? And even who are those people who comment and engage on social media? A lot of times I know, as someone who manages my library's social media, I have regulars, people who, when we announce something, they love our posts, they comment frequently, and I do my research on those people to know, who they are, to see what other engagements they may have, and to start cultivating them to give. So, it doesn't have to be really complicated. If you don't have that donor pipeline necessarily to pull from, or you don't have a board, it can be as simple as looking at who engages with your library. That's always a great place to start.
And to acknowledge, I mean, building a pipeline, it's difficult, right? So I get it. I have metrics every fiscal year that I need to meet, but there was no real established pipelines. And to build a strong pipeline, that takes years. That's years worth of work and engagement. So going back to, I think it was our second slide of the donor prospect cycle, that's why it's really important to try to have people in different phases of that cycle, right? So you ideally don't want everyone in the prospecting phase, right? Qualification. You want people in cultivation, stewardship, solicitation. So, over these years, you're constantly building that up and moving people through that cycle, but keeping those reoccurring annual gifts coming in each year. Giving days. So at UCR, we participate every year in Giving Tuesday, our Giving Tuesday efforts. So that's really a big one for our campus, but then also we do have other crowdfunding campaigns that happen throughout the year. So this is a great way to me to have those short-term and like heavy impact type of giving. So this really, I mean, Giving Tuesday isn't really meant for maybe a capital project because the amount is so big. Usually you won't raise enough in one day to support that. But if you have things like, say, a makerspace and we need 3D printers, right? We need more paper to stack our labs, things like that, where people can see, okay, if I give this $10, I can see a direct impact to raise this $100 that they need to buy, more tools and things for students to use in our library space. So this is also a very good way to collaborate with communications. You can use this if you use Twitter, right? Instagram, those type of formats to shoot out that information and to keep people energized throughout the day of your Giving Tuesday or whatever crowdfunding campaign day you're focused on.
And even if you don't have a really big marketing shop, I'm a marketing shop of one, actually half, maybe a quarter, depending on the day. It's okay. There are still things that you can do. So this last Giving Tuesday, what happened was, we had a little bit of messaging that we put out as a university for Giving Tuesday. A lot of what we did was over email. The university maybe put out one post. That was about it. I think we're seeing a trend moving away from Giving Tuesday because everybody loves Giving Tuesday. So, it's more impactful to have your own giving day. So you're not competing with everybody. But anyway, so, what ended up happening was there wasn't a whole lot going on, but I felt like we needed to acknowledge at least somehow that this was happening, that Giving Tuesday existed. And so what I did was, I'm a donor to my library, and I shared my giving story. I shared about how I had given to our textbook fund. This is a fund to buy textbooks that students who can't afford textbooks can borrow. And I shared that, I gave because I care about student affordability. It matters to me. Access is important to me. And I shared my story. And then I shared it to my personal network. And I raised a few $100s from my personal network that day for my library. So even when it seems like there's nobody and it's just you can still do things to raise money for your library. And it's those stories. Storytelling is so important in fundraising. And on those giving days, that's when donors want to hear those stories. How, you know, how gifts cause an impact in your community. So, I mean, that's what really gets donors excited. And you really want to think about what are those stories that I can share on that day.
Yes, and to Joyce's point about sharing stories, earlier you can identify ambassadors to help spread the word, the better. Because like Joyce said, she shared it with her network, right? And then people started giving because of her sharing her story. So identify those ambassadors for your giving day very early, because once they start spreading the word, right, that's how you bring in money through impacts. Now, also, if you have an annual donor who would be willing to use their annual gift as, say, a challenge fund, I mean, those are also exciting ways to keep people engaged and energized. Like if 10 people give, this will unlock an $1,000. If 10 more people give, we receive an additional $1,000. Even if on the back end, you already know you're getting that money, it's still a great way to kind of, you know, get people excited during that day of giving.
Yeah, challenges are great. We had a whole bunch of new deans that came into our university at the same time, including the library dean. And so what we did for our last giving day was we pitted them against each other. So they each had to pick a fund, and whichever college raised the most money, the other deans had to give to their college. So I can totally see public libraries doing this with other public libraries. And so, you know, you challenge one another for who can get the most donors. There are lots of fun options to really encourage people to give.
Agreed. Healthy competition.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
All right. Events that cultivate. So, you know, being completely transparent, events are not my favorite thing, especially I am the only assigned fundraiser for the library, right? So any event planning, that's usually all on me. So I try to be very purposeful when thinking of events I want to do. You don't want to do an event just for the sake of doing an event, or where it costs more money than you actually brought in, right? Because then that also makes no sense. So think about, is there a new collection opening, right? Is something new happening at your library where it's already sort of a built-in event, and then you can invite donors or even prospects, people you want to engage. That's a great opportunity to bring them in and invite them to those events. Maybe this is a great stewardship touch point. Maybe your leadership team, your library, the dean, he'll be there or she'll be there, and you can introduce them and have that in-person connection as well to properly steward a donor that's existing. So I would say just use your events very wisely on how, because they are a huge time suck. And if there's not an end goal or an exact purpose, it can seem like the time and the labor that went into it didn't pay off in the end.
And there are also opportunities too, if you're having an event, to build in donor experiences into that event that are unique to donors. So one of the things that you can do is offer previews to donors. So like they're the first ones to be able to get in to a program that you're hosting. So they're sitting right up front into the event. They have saved seats, so they don't have to worry about where am I going to sit. You can, if you're having a speaker, why not have a donor event beforehand where they have the opportunity to meet that speaker, to meet that author, and have that one-on-one conversation. To give them those side benefits, I think is really, really helpful.
And I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Jernine.
I was going to say, and even if you have other spaces, so if you're at a university, maybe think about other spaces that you have. So us, we also have an arts museum. Maybe there's an exhibition up at the arts museum that a library donor might be interested in. You can take them there for a tour, maybe a more of a one-on-one experience, but think about how you can utilize other spaces as well.
And I think stewardship events can be really successful as well. We've had a lot of good luck with stewardship events. So like during National Library Week, we will, this is before COVID, we would invite donors to come to the library. We'd give them cocktails and some light hors d'oeuvres. And then we'd have students speak about how they have been impacted by these gifts. And I can tell you there's not a dry eye in the house. Donors want to hear from the people who benefited from their gifts. And it really motivates these donors to want to continue to give. So that's worked really well for us.
And so this really what we just were talking about in terms of events really feeds into this next slide around stewardship and retaining your existing donor base. Right, stewardship is the key to doing that. So, you should have a standard stewardship plan, right? So a $500 donor should not be stewarded, right, in the same way a $25,000 donor is stewarded. So what is that plan? What does that look like? Maybe, so I know for me, gifts 2,000 and under, that's a letter for me. If it's over 2,000, then that's a signed letter from our university librarian. Gifts of $25,000 more, he'll write a personal note to the, it won't be just the standardized letter that we have. Also, maybe there's a collection piece that you can put as a picture, you send that out with the letter as well, a bookmark. Maybe if you have a 3D printing lab, you can do an image of your library, right? And do like a cool little keychain and send that out to your donors to steward them as well. Lunch or even just meeting for coffee and just chatting, not about a gift or something coming up that you want them to give to, but just a conversation of checking in. How are you doing? How's your family doing? What's been going on with you? I find some donors really, really enjoy that personal one-on-one touch. And I've had some that say, no, I want to give my gift. I don't want to meet with you. And, I thank them for their time and continue just to send them information, making sure they receive our monthly newsletter, our electronic newsletter, and also our university magazine as well. So there are many different ways that you can steward your donors to make sure you're retaining them and they don't feel like I only hear from you when you need me to give more money.
And it's okay if that communication plan evolves over time.
Yes.
I know as with a brand new dean, a brand new leader, and with us as a beginning shop, we started off by sending birthday cards, thank you notes to anybody who had given to the library. And I can't tell you how many thank yous I have gotten for thank you notes and birthday cards. A lot of times donors feel like, oh, if I give a little bit, that doesn't matter. But we really wanted to make those donors, no matter how much they gave, feel like they were important since we were just starting out. And we felt that losing, even the smallest donor when you're just starting out would be terrible. So we really put a lot of emphasis on stewardship early on. Now that we're building more of a pipeline, we're starting to rethink what we're doing because it's not sustainable. My dean is getting hand cramps here with writing all these notes. But, I think especially when you're first starting, you really want to, you can't over communicate. And also, go ahead, Jernine.
No, I was going to say, this also could be a good way to tap into if you have a volunteer base, right? Maybe they can make some of those calls and outreach, and, you know, just calling to thank you, you know, looking at what Amanda put in the comments about the voicemail she received when she gave the $25 gift. Right, so for us, we do have students that volunteer after our giving day to reach out and call people and thank them for their gift. So if you have volunteers you can lean on as well, that's also a great way to involve something into your stewardship plan, communication plan.
And you also, I think it's important to really acknowledge donors publicly. So if you have a named collection or a named space in your library, you know, make sure you use the donor's name if that's what their intention is and that's what they want. It's important to talk to donors about how they want to be stewarded and how they want to be acknowledged. And if, you know, they are donors who want to be acknowledged, you want to acknowledge them every chance that you have. And thank donors. We make it a point before programs to thank the donors that made the program possible, that made the library space possible. So they know that we care about them and we appreciate what they've done.
Agreed. And I was just responding into the chat as well. I think that's also, you're right, a great way to involve your board members, Katie, about having them do handwritten notes, you know, and thanking donors. That's also, yes, a great opportunity to engage your board as well.
So what questions do you have for us?
And we can take the slides down, and feel free, if you're comfortable, just unmuting yourself and asking questions or using the chat, either or.
I'll say, I think going back to your discovery and cultivation slide, it feels maybe different in the public library space. Because we don't, you know, I know you're small shops maybe for your particular groups, but like we really don't have, it feels like a lot to call someone in our community and cold call them and ask them to donate to the library. It feels like we're in a different space than a lot of other nonprofits. So when you had that slide up, I was thinking about the kind of discovery and cultivation. Maybe we need to think about it a little differently, and it's our patrons and it's our board members and people we know. And every time we're talking about our programs and our services, that's kind of like a touch point. So it's not just us calling somebody up and saying, hey, do you know about the library? Do you want to make a donation? It's, you know, we have these services, and then way down the list is, do you know that we also accept donations, and your donations really support all of these things?
Yes, that's a great point. So yes, let me clarify. When I said cold calls for qualification, I'm not asking them for money the first time. It's really an information quest, a discovery quest. So, you know, so I'm right at a university. How was your experience here? Did you enjoy your time here? Are there any alumni you're still connected with? What were programs? Were you involved in any organizations on campus? Right. So then that gives me more of a feel. Where else are you giving? Because that lets me know if they're inclined to even giving. And so, because I am a development officer, I do make it clear to them, though, that my role is fundraising, because that it sometimes can be a slippery slope of it turns into just, oh, you're nice. I like talking to you. Yeah, let's talk. But I have no intentions on ever giving, but I just like talking to you and hanging out, right? So I do make it clear that my role is to raise money for the university and support our mission. But I do not ask for a gift in probably the first 1 to 3 touch points. I do wait a while just to kind of suss out what they might be interested in and more engaged with. So, but thank you. That is a good point, though, that you bring up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's not necessarily a cold call asking for money. It's more of, I want to build a relationship with you and I want to learn more about you. You know, what are your passions? What What drives you? What has your experience been like in the library? You know, when did you last come visit? Did you see this new makerspace that we built? You know, I'd love to give you a tour and talk to you and get to know more about you. So I think, you know, you're laying the groundwork for that ask that's going to come later on.
And Douglas, I see you've had your hand raised.
Yeah, I guess I would second Katie's sentiment where Connecticut is 169 very small towns. Some of us are associations, some are straight municipal, and the amounts of money that you're talking about are, like, to us, astronomical. I mean, I probably speak for everybody. Like, if any one of us got a $25,000 gift, we'd be like freaking out. On that
I still
note,
freak out when I get a
Yeah.
25.
it's good to
I
know.
don't think of that as small money either. Trust
I
me.
mean, I guess my question is something like, how, say, you know, you probably have like multiple funds to fill. Mine in Newtown, Connecticut would just be one. It would be like a legacy fund or the president's fund or something like that. It isn't even named yet. So we're really at the initial stages. But what would be, I mean, we have 27,000 people in town. My budget total is something like $1.6 million for everything, all in. So in your estimation, and maybe the other libraries would scale off of this, what would be a reasonable or an unreasonable goal for that first fund? Would it be $100,000? Would it be like $1 million? Like, what do you think I'm looking at in order to draw some, eventually the point is to draw some income off of that and fund a position or something fantastic? You know, do you have any thoughts on that?
Joyce, or you want me to take it?
Go ahead, Jernine.
Sure. So, okay. So to clarify, are you talking about like an endowment?
Yeah. Like,
Okay.
it would be like, and you know, I probably will be revealing how naive I am, but if multiple, to us, big donors contributed to one pot, and then like, you know, some sort of legacy fund or a president's fund or something, and then we draw down from that, but an endowment that we keep in perpetuity that people can still add to, that we can then use the income from.
Sure. So, okay. So whatever your amount is to have that endowment established, right? So that's first. Second, I think if 100,000, that is a good number if you have multiple people you think can give larger gifts, because maybe even it's a group who are in connection with each other. So there's that level, right, of good peer pressure, right? So if you have one person who is willing to give a larger gift and who doesn't mind you sharing that they've given that larger gift, then that can sometimes motivate the others to pick, like, okay, each year, this is what we're raising, this is where we are. We've had our initial gift of this amount. And if each person were to give, if they can give over months, is that an option as well, to give like a month? So say they're willing to say, I'll give 25, but I need to break it up in $5,000 installments. Is that?
Sure, I'll take money however they want.
Okay.
You know.
So right. So maybe letting them know that's also an option, right? It doesn't have to be one lump sum, but there's some sort of agreement that they'll fulfill their pledge within the certain amount of time. So those are ways that we've done it, where people have made like a $25,000 or $50,000 pledge, but they're fulfilling that over a monthly time. It may be years, it may be over 2 years or 1 year. It just depends of your structure and how that might work. But that's how we've done it in the past and still. Joyce, I don't know if you have anything you might want to.
Yeah, I mean, that's similar. We do endowments as small as $10,000 at my place, which is unusually low. But there is enough income to be able to draw off of that. It's not a lot, but it's something. So, I mean, you can start small. It's certainly possible. Yeah.
Okay.
I saw the question in the comments about capital campaigns. I have not had any, I don't have direct experience on capital projects, but Joyce, you might.
A little. We have a capital campaign that we're going through right now. In terms of a kickoff, you want to make sure that you've raised enough money before you kick off the campaign, and make it public. You want to have a silent phase where, you know, you're working those relationships that you have. You've gotten a few bigger gifts that you can point to, because then when you go public, you have something to say, hey, we have this groundswell of support already. Why don't you keep the momentum going, so we can meet our goal? A lot of times, universities, what they do with a capital campaign is they will start counting a few years ago, and then you know, and sort of backdate it so that they have this massive support already before they go public. With that
Right,
being,
and-
yeah, go ahead,
I was
Jernine.
gonna say, and so how we term that, those are our reach back gifts. So that's what we call them, is the reach back gifts.
But yeah, in terms of a kickoff, I think it's really important that you know, say what the goal is and say where you are at meeting that goal, and really encourage people to keep that momentum going. Yeah, I think there are lots of ways you can do it. You know, we launched our, we call it a comprehensive campaign, but it's essentially a capital campaign during the pandemic. So we had a virtual launch, which it wasn't, we had to do it. We didn't have a choice. But we had a lot of speakers, you know, famous alumni who, you know, loved our library or loved our university and said, you know, great things about us and how they were excited about giving and that they've seen the impact that, you know, we've had. So yeah, I think, you know, make sure you have some good gifts before you go public, and then acknowledge those donors, and really, you know, this is where you celebrate that you're launching something new, and to get people really excited about what's to come.
And this also might be a great space to partner with corporate support if you have corporations in the area, or even not in the immediate area, whose giving aligns with what you're working on in your library. This is really a great place for you to partner with that corporate support.
Yeah, it all corporate support counts, foundational support counts. Yeah, all great avenues to pursue.
All right, any other questions for Jernine or Joyce? All right, well, I guess we came in just barely under an hour. This was fantastic. Thank you, Joyce, Jernine. Thank you so much for being here. You gave us a lot to think about.
Of course. Thank you for having us. And please feel free to reach out to either one of us at any time. If you have any questions or you just want to collaborate, bounce ideas, I think I speak for Joyce as well, that we're always open to talking, chatting, what have you.
I'm going to put my email in the chat. So
Yes.
Feel free if you want to reach out at any time to do so.
Great. Thank you. Hopefully one day we will all be able to celebrate our own $25,000 gifts to our libraries.
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Well,
Thank you.
have a great
Thank
day.
you.